News Central now at this hour begins in Nigeria, where state governors have rejected the 60,000 naira minimum wage as earlier proposed by the federal government. Organized labor had turned down the proposal as being insufficient. In a statement issued on Friday by the Director of Media and Public Affairs for the Nigerian Governors Forum, Halima Ahmed, the governor said the proposed minimum wage is too high and not sustainable. The governors expressed concerns that if 60,000 naira is adopted as the minimum wage, many states will spend their entire federal allocations on salaries, leaving no resources for development projects. The NGF urged all parties involved in the negotiation process, particularly the labor unions, to consider all socio-economic factors and reach a sustainable agreement.
We had a very fruitful deliberation, and of course, you know, it's a technical subcommittee of a committee, and at the level of our committee, we have reached near consensus, and it is our hope that by the time we get to the plenary, we'll have a complete agreement, and maybe from there, the media can start their job. But as it is now, I think we are better off than we were before the technical committee.
But the meeting is not ended yet.
The technical committee is over, and of course, you know, it's a tripartite committee. We've struggled to reach an agreement, at least between the government and the organized private sector. We are still engaging the organized level, and I'm almost confident that in a few minutes from now, after the plenary, we would have reached a concrete agreement.
62,000 naira. Why? That's what they agreed to, because they, of course, you know, this thing has gone on for 4 months, so they've done a lot of consultations, they've done a lot of negotiations and then deliberations, and they came up with that figure. Remember that figure had been on like 60,000 last time, 2 sittings or 3 sittings ago, and then came back and then topped to 62,000, and I said that's their benchmark. Okay, so for them to accept that and to bring that forward, including the organized private sector, for that it's sustainable because they agreed to it. So I believe that that's what they can pay.
Meanwhile, the federal government of Nigeria has increased its offer of a new national minimum wage to 62,000 naira, while the organized labor has reduced its demand from 494,000 naira to 250,000 naira. This comes after the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, submitted the cost implication of the minimum wage to President Bola Tinubu. Now, a bill seeking to establish a Federal College of Agriculture in Agila, Benue State, has received overwhelming acceptance during the public hearing at the National Assembly. The public hearing, which attracted stakeholders from various sectors, including education, agriculture, and government, saw widespread support for the bill. Speakers praised the initiative, highlighting the potential of the college to address the nation's agricultural challenges. The sponsor, Philip Adbese, who represents Ado Apoku Odbadibo Federal Constituency, said the proposed institution is critical to Nigeria's food production and research. He noted that this is a significant step towards transforming Nigeria's agricultural sector and unlocking its full potential. Away from that, MultiChoice Nigeria says it will appeal Friday's ruling of the Competition and Consumer Protection Tribunal in Abuja, which awarded 150 million naira fine against it for challenging the court's jurisdiction. The tribunal had fined MultiChoice Nigeria the sum of 150 million naira for disobeying its order. The order had restrained the pay TV company from increasing its monthly subscription pending the determination of the suit brought before it by an Abuja-based lawyer named Festus Onifade. The tribunal also ordered the pay TV company to provide its Nigerian customers with a 1-month free subscription to its DSTV and GoTV packages, MultiChoice, in a statement, disagreed with the ruling, saying it would file an appeal against it. A former president of the Nigerian Senate, Bukola Saraki, has lauded the Supreme Court's decision to overturn the Federal High Court's ruling on the alleged 3.5 billion fraud case involving Melrose General Services Limited. Saraki said the judgment validates his earlier assertion that the case was politically driven, aimed at targeting him for his Senate presidency during the Buhari administration. Saraki, speaking through his media aide, Yusuf Olanionu, emphasized the vindication following the Supreme Court's verdict on June 7 in Abuja. In April 2018, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission had claimed that Melrose General Services Limited fraudulently obtained 1.4 billion naira from the Nigeria Governors Forum, a charge now overturned by the recent ruling. Saraki added that allegations of Paris Club fraud were nothing more than a smokescreen designed to weaken the institution of his office. Let's also tell you that the House of Representatives has passed for the third reading the 2024 Supplementary Appropriation Bill for the Federal Capital Administration of about 98.5 billion naira. This was as the chairman of the House Committee on the Federal Capital Territory presented his committee's report, saying that the appropriation bill earlier presented by the president has been thoroughly scrutinized and should be considered for the needed development of the capital. The submission was then unanimously adopted by the House in the Committee of the Whole. And now to discuss this, we are joined by Vayala Kwaga, Senior Researcher and Policy Analyst, Budget Foundation. Thank you so much, Vayala, for joining us.
Hi, Lekon. Thanks for having me.
Yes, considering the timing of the year June 2024, is a supplementary budget of this size, we're talking about 98.5 billion naira, typical for the Federal Capital Territory Administration. Also, were there any unforeseen circumstances that might justify this additional spending?
I suppose if you look at Nigeria's past performance, the FCT's past performance when it comes to coming up with budgets, this is actually quite unusual. But with the new minister of the FCT being the infamous Wike, it's not particularly surprising. Wike is someone who I think is well known for implementing capital projects, as much as you might disagree with his politics. And looking at the communication and the commentary from residents of the FCT, it appears that he's actually putting paid to a lot of the beliefs about him in terms of infrastructure in the FCT. However, what is worrying, I suppose, would be the total amounts to date. There was recently a 1.2 trillion naira supplementary budget passed, I think a couple of months ago for the FCT, and plus this 98 billion is bringing the total budget, within these two very brief periods to about 1.3 trillion naira. And, that, be that as it may, we need to know how this money is being used, as it's used for projects.
Well, that actually tells us that typically we usually do not have a breakdown of budget allocation in these like manners. But then if we were to look at it, a concentration of trillions of naira to be expended for the FCT, is there any justification? Are there going to be turnovers that will be beneficial to Nigeria as a whole? And will that also speak to the issue around transparency when it comes to spendings like this?
It's very, very interesting that you make that comment. And the FCT is notorious for not releasing its budgets. This is not just a Wike issue. In the course of my career and my dealings with the FCT in trying to get their budgets, in trying to get budget implementation reports, it's almost always next to impossible to get these documents. And it really speaks to the entrenched opacity of the FCT as regards, financial transparency and the need for citizens to know how much money is being generated, how much money is being spent, and how well that money is being spent. As much as Nigerians would be pleased and delighted to see the reports, delighted to see the infrastructure being constructed and, some level of goods and services being improved, public goods and services being improved because of that, there is the corresponding responsibility on government side to provide this information and to have a willingness to explain to Nigerians why they spend this money in this manner and how they intend to raise money. On your point about revenue, the Nigerian political space, and I'm speaking federal level and state level, isn't very well known for having revenues and expenditure meeting themselves. Every now and then you do see a state that earns, a high level of IGR, that raises a lot of IGR, and in combination with FAC, it could be, much more than it spends. But by and large, especially for the federal government, you have what we call deficit spending, where you are basically spending more than you earn. And for a territory like the FCT, it's important that citizens know exactly how much is being earned and how these processes can be improved to be more efficient and effective.
Yeah, you talked about the FAC allocation. Now, when we look at the excerpt, it actually mentioned that the FCTA statutory revenue fund as the source of these supplementary budgets. So are you concerned about the FCT's ability to replenish the statutory fund after using such a large amount for this mid-year spending? You talked about over ₦1 trillion that has been expended or that has been made available for the FCT in the first quarter of this year, I believe, and now another supplementary budget's coming on board. And there are questions around the financing and if the FCT will be able to replicate in terms of numbers. You've also talked about revenue deficits, what is to be expended, what is, if I could put it in a bracket of ROI. So how do we balance the books?
Yeah, great question. The fact is that public authorities need to understand that their states, or the territories that they administer, are going concerns. By going concerns, I mean there are different aspects of their territories, whether it be through licenses, through fines, through some forms of taxation, through rates, through rents, through sale and management of property, that they can derive revenue. And it's very unfortunate that Nigerian politicians, by and large, tend to see the areas upon which they govern as mainly their fiefdoms. They don't really see that they're responsible for generating economic activity that, by the way, would benefit the state in the long run, because you'd have more revenue available for the states. You'd have more revenue available for the territory to execute projects that it believes are important to it without having to wait for a federal allocation or for some statutory allocation from some source. So the eyes must be on how the FCT is going to raise money to replenish what has been given or what has been budgeted. For instance, housing taxation or taxation on landed properties. It's a known secret that a lot of buildings, owned by very wealthy Nigerians are in the FCT. But subsequent question would be: are these homeowners are they paying the right and appropriate amount of property taxes for these homes? A lot of them, do not have human beings dwelling in them, and they are just left, unoccupied. Shouldn't there be some form of penalty for building this massive home to the state? Because you are, in some sense, sitting on an asset, and it should be beneficial at least to the government that owns the land under which it is being built. And you add this to other aspects, that Abuja or the FCT is actually poised to collect, being the melting pot of Nigeria, being the seat of government, being where all the consulates are, where foreigners fly in from. There is untold levels of, income that the FCT can raise in different aspects of tourism, healthcare, education. Yeah. It runs the whole gamut, of what a state could earn, for instance. So while we're waiting with bated breath to see how well we can implement, these projects that he has started, there needs to be a corresponding role by him to ensure that Abuja is a safe place. It's a safe place for business. It's a safe place for investment, and it's a safe place for Nigerians to thrive.
So Vayala, before I let you go, we are in a democratic setting and we see a lot of money is being thrown around without any form of accountability, and we don't even have these figures being put out for public scrutiny before they are being ratified for spending. Is there a way that citizens, institutions, organizations can create a mechanism whereby we begin to hold these public office holders or these public institutions accountable for these taxpayers' money that are being spent without proper documentation?
Absolutely. I mean, for the FCT, you have the House of Representatives and the Senate. For other states, it's the State House of Assembly. But citizens need to understand that politicians often, Nigerian politicians, more often than not, do not have the incentive to ensure accountability, because these are the same elites that pass laws, that ensure money is being spent without proper accountability. So you cannot really expect that same level of scrutiny. Citizens need to come together. I tell people, join groups, support the media, support civil society organizations that provide you with this information, with this analysis, support media organizations that have a foot in the door with these politicians, that can ask questions, I can carry out investigative journalism and make this information available to you. But what Nigerians need to do is, we cannot do this as individuals. We must be able to come together and work collectively and look past ethnic, religious, regional differences and see that Nigeria's common destiny is something that all of us can benefit from.
All right. Vayala Kwaga, our senior researcher and policy analyst, Budget Foundation, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Delighted as always.
You're watching News Central now. A break will do here. We'll be back with more stories in a bit. Don't go away. Many thanks for staying with us. The Nigeria Diaspora Forum has called on the federal government to ensure justice for the family of 44-year-old Ebuka Nwoko, who was allegedly murdered in the custody of the South African police. The country director of the forum, while speaking to newsmen in Abuja, says that the incidents occurred on May 17 and raises questions on whether government is willing to put an end to the killing of citizens outside the country. We have details in this report.
The stories have remained the same, from Europe to America to Asia and even within the African continent. Nigerians have been targeted for various reasons, with some losing their lives in the process. Since 2016 till date, available data states that over 200 Nigerians have been extrajudicially killed in South Africa. The recent death of Ebuka Nwoko, a 43-year-old Nigerian, allegedly murdered while in the custody of South African security officials, is yet another harrowing example of the mistreatment Nigerians face overseas.
This ill treatment of Nigerians in South Africa has been ongoing for several years, and it's unfortunate that successive South African governments have done little to protect the lives and properties of Nigerians living in South Africa. The frequency of these often tragic South African police attacks on Nigerians living in South Africa have reached a crescendo, and Nigerian Diaspora Forum, NDF, is calling upon Nigerian government to call on South African government and its police force to please put an end to these incidents.
For any country in Africa to become an enemy to Nigerians because of the fact they are contributing to the development of your country, I don't think is wise. It's a problem to the country. You need people to come and interface with you, bring up new, ideas.
The Nigeria Diaspora Forum says since the death of Nwoko, it has continued to fight for justice and has written several petitions to agencies responsible for action. This, the forum says, prompted the House of Representatives to start a probe into the cause and circumstances surrounding his death.
Saddened that Nigerian lives are continuously devalued and disregarded, even in nations that claim to uphold democratic values and the rule of law. South Africa, a nation we once looked to as a beacon of hope and progress, now stands as a stark reminder of the systematic injustice and abuse our people suffer abroad.
We're calling for a prompt, transparent, and exhaustive investigation into this unlawful killing of Mr. Ebuka Nwoko by the South African police.
Nature abhors vacuum. If you close your border, Nigerians will move to another country and contribute to the development of that country. And that is why we are accepted anywhere in the world. And we are doing well and we will continue to do well.
The death of Ebuka Nwoko once again raises questions about the safety of Nigerians abroad and the willingness of government to protect its citizens outside the country. For the Nigerians in Diaspora Forum, they say they will not rest until the late Nwoko gets justice. In Abuja for News Central, Marvelous Obomman.
The Universal Basic Education Commission said it will review aspects of the Universal Basic Education Act of 2004 that are hindering its smooth operation. Speaking in Lagos on Friday at the opening of a two-day retreat for the Senate Committee on Education with the theme Basic Education Implementation in Nigeria, Issues, Challenges and the Way Forward, the Executive Secretary, UBEC, Dr. Hamid Boboyi, explained that due to societal developments and changes since 2004, the Act has become overdue for review. He stressed the need for the education system to address the country's challenges. Chairman of the event, Senator Benga Daniel, called for increased funding, tech integration, community engagement, and resource allocation for basic education. Now, the Nigerian Correctional Service has revealed plans to unveil the pictures of escaped inmates of the recent Suleja jailbreak in the upcoming weeks. No fewer than 120 inmates escaped in April this year from the Medium Security Custodial Center in Suleja, Niger State, following the torrential rainfall that damaged the walls of the prison facility. The public relations officer of the service made this known in Abuja while answering questions from newsmen at a joint press briefing of security, defense, and response agencies in Abuja. He says that 23 escapees have already been recaptured and efforts are underway to recapture those still at large.
Jailbreak that gave way for about 120 inmates that escaped from our custodial centers. I want to say here that there is a very huge effort from the service to recapture the fleeing inmates. And I want to say it here that we have been able to recapture so far about 23, which are back to our facilities now. And about the biometrics, this week I want to make it very clear, or I want to say it very clear here, that by the grace of God this week, we'll have the pictures and their details out, because we are working with other security agencies that have been able to, get their pictures and other details of them. So this week, our ICT unit are also working in collaboration with NIPSI and Immigration Office, and there is huge effort in the recovery of such information that is needed for us to put at the public space. You will get it.
The rising prevalence of dementia among Nigeria's aging population amidst a lack of health infrastructure needed for its management is a source of worry for healthcare practitioners and stakeholders. While the majority of persons living with dementia are found in low-income countries, factors like lack of awareness, diagnosis, and expertise puts more people at risk, and these needs need to be addressed. Du Central's Adeshewo Dushoga examines this health concern.
As of 2015, an estimated 2.13 million people were living with dementia in sub-Saharan Africa. And this number is projected to nearly double every 20 years, increasing to 3.48 million by 2030 and 7.62 million by 2050. 72-year-old Madam Kudirat Mustafa is one of the millions of persons living with dementia in Africa. A resident of Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria, Madam Kudirat has been living with dementia for more than a decade, an illness that began from the amputation of one of her legs after being diagnosed of diabetes.
Okay.
Mama also struggles with her sense of hearing.
Yes.
Victoria is Madam Kudirat Mustafa's daughter-in-law and also doubles as her caregiver, a responsibility she took up since her mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia. Victoria had to switch careers as an accountant to being a caregiver and a school teacher to afford her time to better care for her mother-in-law of more than 18 years.
It was after the amputation we discovered that she was losing memory. She couldn't remember simple things like her name. She was mixing up the faces of the children. She would call this one another person's name. And then she would wake up in the middle of the night and be asking that it's in the morning she wants to go out. You know, that was when we noticed that. And then we didn't know much about dementia. I was hearing it. I've not actually known or read anything about dementia until she started exhibiting those symptoms. And it was worrisome because she'll wake up at 2 a.m. and she'll be insisting somebody wants to buy something from our provision store, come and open the door. I was like, provision store that you have left some years ago back in the north, who is buying something at 2 a.m.?
Dementia is one of the major causes of disability and dependency among older people globally. It has physical, psychological, social, and economic impact, not only for people living with it, but also for the carers, families, and society at large. Victoria also shares the same fate as a carer, especially in Nigeria.
Caring for somebody with dementia is very, very burdensome because, like, you know, we're told as the disease progresses, they begin to lose the ability to do basic things for themselves. Bathing, knowing the proper place to go to ease themselves, you know, it becomes difficult. They will lose. Sometimes they will, you know, mistakenly or accidentally do it on themselves. And you will like, you know, those kind of a thing. And you will think they are deliberately doing it. But most times it's not deliberate. It's just that at that moment they become confused. They don't know which way to take. Sometimes she can go to the kitchen and she will tell you she's going to the toilet.
Dr. Timitokpe Farumbi is a geriatric neurologist at the University College Hospital in Ibadan, where Madam Kudirat is being managed. While speaking to us, she dispels the common myth associated with dementia, especially in this part of the world, and emphasized the need to raise awareness.
Dementia is getting worse, as in the prevalence is getting worse. However, the knowledge is really, really low in this part of the world because people often misconstrue dementia for other spiritual cause, or they misconstrue it as mental illness. And that has a lot of stigma attached to it. So people don't even want to come out to show what is actually wrong with their loved ones, because people can tag their parent as being a witch or a wizard, and then nobody wants to associate themselves with that. I know that we have National Senior Citizen Center that was established about a year or so ago, and they are doing a lot in the social welfare of older adults, but it's still like a drop in the ocean at the moment. It's a lot there. It's a sector that needs a lot of funding and support.
While the numbers of persons living with dementia in Africa are recorded in millions, there are chances that the numbers could be more amidst underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis shrouded in myth. There is also a need for the government to further raise awareness, create an enabling environment for caregivers, and adequate health facility for senior citizens in the country. In Ibadan, Oyo State, for News Central, Adeshawa Odushoga.
Thank you very much, Adeshawa, for that detailed report. We're still talking health anyway. The United Nations Children Education Fund has urged Nigerians to discard prejudices that promote vaccine hesitancy in the country, saying embracing immunization is key to protecting infants from diseases and avoidable deaths. This was as UNICEF in Nigeria held a media dialogue in Kano, northwest Nigeria, on the benefits of vaccines and immunization. News Central's Joshua Imorai has more in the story.
Vaccine hesitancy has emerged as a major stumbling block in the quest to achieve universal access to immunization with far-reaching consequences. Despite the availability of life-saving vaccines, a staggering 20% of children globally remain unvaccinated, leading to a tragic toll of 1.5 million preventable deaths annually.
Main issue that we are seeing is the high number of children that they are zero dose, that they have not been immunized. And Nigeria has more than 2 million children that every year they miss immunization. The confidence on immunization and on vaccines is decreasing globally. It's not only something that is happening in Nigeria. According to a report that we have from 2022 from London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, the confidence in vaccines is about 79% of the population, and this is decreasing.
In a bid to combat the challenge of vaccine hesitancy in Nigeria, UNICEF has implemented a change strategy using influencers to combat the menace of vaccine hesitancy.
We are working hand-to-hand with the government on their efforts to really expand coverage of immunizations, to having more children vaccinated, but as well to reducing the ones that they don't have any vaccine. We are supporting the strategies, and as well as UNICEF with a strong community presence, we are supporting the efforts to reach the last mile, to reach difficult areas to reach, right? Sometimes these difficult areas to reach are not in remote and accessible areas. Sometimes are in urban slums or even close to the facilities. UNICEF can play, and is playing actually, a role supporting this engagement with the communities, right? With the town halls, we have a network of more than 13,000 community mobilizers that they are from different communities all across the north of Nigeria supporting those efforts.
For any activity UNICEF is doing, I usually attend and I get to relate with the locals in whichever community I find myself and pass the relevant information that needs to be, passed across to them. Sometimes we do some skits and videos to sensitize people on, some of the things they need to know about the importance of immunization and other vices that we're talking about. We realize that some of the mothers, they usually bring their children for the first dose of the vaccine, and later they disappear. So these people need to be traced.
In a world where vaccines can be the difference between life and death, UNICEF is urging Nigerians to get vaccinated and overcome hesitancy in an effort to build a safer and healthier society for all. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarai.
News Central now continues in East Africa, where two alleged lesbians said to be seeking to get married have been arrested in the Comoros, where same-sex relationships are forbidden. The women are being detained in a prison in the Indian Ocean Archipelago's capital, Moroni, pending a court appearance, and could face up to 2 years imprisonment or a €600 fine. The allegations against the women seem to have surfaced following controversy over a lesbian wedding in neighboring Mayoti. Home to an 870,000-strong, mainly Muslim population, the Comoros introduced legislation against same-sex sexual activity in 1981, 6 years after independence from France. Still in East Africa, the African Union has condemned a massacre in a Sudanese village where at least 150 civilians, including around 35 children, were killed. African Union Commission Chief Musa Faki Mahamat called on the warring sides to end the fighting unconditionally and to facilitate unhindered humanitarian access to the needy population. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also condemned the paramilitary attack, saying it was high time for all parties to silence their guns and commit to a path towards sustainable peace. Pro-democracy activists say more than 100 people died when RSF forces attacked the central village of Bad al-Nura with heavy artillery on Wednesday. Sudan has been ravaged by a war since April 2023, when fighting broke out between the army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Now, a court has termed as punishable by death an attempted coup in Kinshasa last month by 3 American suspects and 50 other defendants, Marcel Malanga and Taylor Christian Thompson, both 21 years, and 36-year-old Benjamin Reuben Zalman Pulun are among defendants in the case and were the first to stand before the judge to hear the charges against them. Defendants wearing blue and yellow prison uniforms took the stand one by one under a large tent in the grounds of the Ndolo military prison to hear their charges. From other continents, we'll tell you that the Israeli military on Saturday said its troops had rescued 4 Israeli hostages alive from Gaza after a complex daytime operation. The army named the rescued hostages as Noah Agamani, 25 years, Almog Mir Yan, 21 years, Andrei Koslov, 27 years, and Shlomi Ziv, 40 years. According to the military, all 4 were kidnapped by Hamas militants from the Nova Music Festival on October 7. Israel Army spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the operation took place in 2 separate buildings in the heart of a civilian neighborhood.
Undergo medical examination and will soon be reunited with their families in the hospital. Noah, Almog, Andrei, and Shlomi were rescued after 246 days in Hamas captivity after they were brutally kidnapped from the Nova Musical Festival on the 7th of October. This was a high-risk complex mission based on precise intelligence conducted in daylight in 2 separate buildings deep inside Gaza. While under fire inside the buildings, under fire on the way out from Gaza, our forces rescued our hostages. Israeli forces have been preparing for this rescue mission for weeks. They underwent intensive training. They risked their lives to save the lives of our hostages.
Now, scientists and international experts have agreed on the need for an immediate action to protect the oceans during a forum in Costa Rica held ahead of the crucial 2025 United Nations meeting in France. Costa Rica's President Rodrigo Chavez, while delivering a speech, said if nothing is done, this generation will take away humanity's future.
Les défis, c'est à la fois de bien rappeler que l'océan est menacé par le dérèglement climatique, que l'océan est menacé par des activités qui pourraient avoir des impacts irréversibles, mais que l'océan est un allié indispensable dans notre lutte. Et donc,
yo creo que todos sabemos que si no actuamos ya, estaríamos como generación quitándole el futuro a la humanidad, y ese es el diagnóstico.
Talking business now, Uganda suffered a rare nationwide electricity blackout for several hours on Friday, its state-run power grid operator said, adding that electricity has, although gradually, been restored late in the afternoon. The grid shutdown happened during the testing of a newly completed Chinese-built $1.5 billion 600-megawatt hydropower plant on the Nile River in the country's north. This has been confirmed by Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited in a post on its X handle. Uganda has an installed power generation capacity of 2,000 megawatts, according to the Energy Ministry. It generates more power than it consumes and has been exploring the possibility of exporting the surplus to neighbors like South Sudan and Kenya. Away from that, Africa Development Bank said that the continent needs quicker debt restructurings, more favorable lending terms, and some $25 billion for the Africa Development Fund to avoid a lost decade, according to its president, Akinwumi Adesina. The FDB president adds that the continent has suffered from long fiscal COVID and the world has not done enough to help it move past the punishing years of the pandemic and global interest rate hikes, which had tipped several countries into default. Addition also called for a $25 billion replenishment of the African Development Fund, the concessional arm of the African Development Bank that lends to vulnerable countries. In sports, a newly promoted Premier League side, Leicester City, has announced that Super Eagles ace Kelechi Iheanacho has left the club. Iheanacho lives at the King Power Stadium after 7 years of service at the club. The Nigerian star, whose contract expires on June 30, joined Leicester City in 2017 from Manchester City, made 232 appearances and scored 64 goals with 33 assists. His trophy cabinet with the former Premier League champions has one FA Cup, Community Shield and EFL Championship trophy. Meanwhile, the contract of his countryman and Fox's teammate Wilfred Ndidi has also expired, but discussions are yet to be finalized. And that's all at this hour. But before we go, we take a quick look at some of our top stories. We told you that Nigeria's parliament backs bill to establish Federal College of Agriculture. MultiChoice Nigeria announces plans to appeal tribunal's 150 million naira fine and free subscription. Finally, we told you that Comoros arrests 2 women reportedly seeking to wed. You can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. Follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV and watch us live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onabanjo.